Hello everybody, just gonna be a quick video. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Ottomans in 1.35, which I think is a very good patch. There's lots of cool stuff in it, fun stuff. And the Ottomans have a very cool souped up mission tree and all their new mechanics. If you want to hear more about that, there are better YouTubers than me making very fun videos looking at the Ottomans. What I do is I read code. So I've been reading all the code about what is required to have the Ottoman Decadence event fire and then actually come through the other side and like reform the government after the event firing. And I have concluded that they have designed the Decadence system, and they've designed a whole set of missions in order to successfully come through the other side and get over the Ottoman decadence and emerge in a new dawn as a new phoenix. You can rise from the ashes and not the ashes, but the the decadence and the corruption, and have all these cool modifiers and things. I'm convinced that there were two design philosophies competing with each other. And I say this not on the basis of much, but I read the dev diary when they were talking in the dev diary about what happens in the case of this disaster firing. Let me just find the line. Here it is. While most players, and the AI without player intervention, will avoid the disasters altogether, those who seek challenge and pain can trigger the Decadence Disaster on purpose in order to unlock the missions which are all about handling the many challenges of your empire. So, on the one hand, we have the design philosophy of this is meant to be a challenge, which is essentially optional. On the one hand, it is relatively optional, but as far as I can tell, the decadence you get from being in the later ages is going to be very difficult to avoid. You can play in a way that avoids it, but it's not at all simple. And it basically means you have to hamstring yourself. You have to always be positive stability, so truce breaking is much harder and things like that. You have to avoid all corruption, and you have to keep all your subjects super loyal. You have to keep your global autonomy very low, that kind of thing. So it's difficult to keep this low. So let's say you want to take, the hard road. You want to go in and do these. So these missions are supposed to be challenging, but they're a way to reform and improve your nation. The problem is butting up against that design philosophy is that these are just very painful and not very difficult. They're not difficult. They're just kind of restricting. So I've been making a document to list all of the things that you need to do in order to trigger the decadence crisis, which is this one here, the internal power struggle, and then come through it in the kind of optimal way. And I just want to give you one example, or maybe I'll give you several examples, but I want to talk a bit about the Janissaries. So the Janissaries are the Ottomans' new unique estate. Very cool idea to make them an estate. That's fun. I like that. But they have not, with all due respect, they have not designed this estate very well. They have various privileges that you can give them. And the idea is that you begin loving this is how the devs put it, you begin loving this estate and you end up with it being a thorn in your side. The problem is that from my perspective, and this is just my perspective, it's a thorn in your side immediately, and you should never give them any privileges. The reason you give them privileges is to attempt to make your army better. In short, you give them privileges to make your army better. The problem is that they have this regularly firing event which turns their privileges into negative versions of the same privilege, or grants them more privileges altogether. And the only way to really avoid this firing is to not give them any privileges. And if you do give them privileges and do have this event firing, it keeps firing even if you go through this stuff and get your new dawn with the Janissaries still existing at the end of it. So there is no version of the Janissaries estate that is, in my view, good. I'm sure there are ways to use it, like to get super powerful and have souped up military, but in the Ottomans, you don't need a souped up military. You already have, you're not going to face military struggles, basically, as the Ottomans in EU4. So I don't really think you need that. But anyway, so it's annoying that if you go through this path, the way where you reform the Janissaries as opposed to massacre them, then you still get this bad version of the Janissaries estate at the end of it, which is annoying. But more than that, the way that you handle the Janissaries is weird. So let's say you go through the campaign with the knowledge in mind that, okay, the Janissaries are going to be difficult, and I have this new cool conditional mission system. So I'm either going to deal with them by killing them all or by reforming them. Those are your two choices. So how do you kill the Janissaries? Well, counterintuitively, the way you kill the Janissaries is by making them extraordinarily powerful. The only way to remove the Janissary estate is to have the Janissaries perform a coup, take over your government, then fight them and get rid of them. What? And this is the way by which you can get Western tech group and Western unit types, the former of which doesn't matter and the latter of which does. Which is weird, right? The only way to get rid of the Janissary estate. I mean, there's definitely other ways. You can change your government type, but within the kind of mission tree, the way to get rid of the Janissaries is to first massively empower them and then kill them all. That's really weird, and it's even weirder when you consider what is required to go the other way, to not fight the Janissaries, but instead avoid the coup ever happening, and then to go down the path of reforming the Janissaries. So here's what you need to do to be able to reform the Janissaries. Some of this you also need to be able to kill all the Janissaries. You have to take 3 military idea groups. You have to have the Janissary influence below 40. You have to have at least 90 legitimacy. You have to have their loyalty above 80, which bizarrely you also need to kill them all, which is curious. If you want to kill them all without the... if you want to go down with the before the coup fires, you have to have them like you, which is strange, but I guess the idea is just, yeah, if you want to kill the Janissaries, you must first let them take over your government, which is, I mean, it's bizarre. You have to have a very good military advisor. Well, very good. You have a +3 military advisor. You have to have 3 stability. You have to be earning at least 12 military points per month, and you have to have a full force limit of troops, only 10% of which at most can be Janissaries. Now, what does that sound like to you? Because to me, that sounds like the exact conditions you'd need a nation in to get rid of the Janissaries. You have a weak, loyal Janissary estate, which has a small portion of your army under its control. You have a very stable, militarily advanced nation. And in that circumstance, you get the bad outcome. You get to keep the Janissaries, and you get them still flipping their privileges to the negative version, and you don't get Western tech group, and you don't get infantry compatibility, and you don't get army attrition decay and things like that. You get Janissary max privileges +1, which is a complete meme, because giving Janissary the privileges is a bad idea because it makes them hate you more quickly. So it's just odd. Why do I have to set up my nation to be in the perfect place for a military reform, to follow that up by not performing a military reform? It's just weird, right? It's just weird. And then the other weird one is that you need just to take so many idea groups to go down here, so many specific idea groups. It's very restricting. So let's say you want to do this, right? Your objective is to get the New Dawn thing done, okay? You have to do it realistically in the kind of optimal path, 6 idea groups. 6 idea groups. So you have to take Admin Tech 22 before you do it, which means that you can't do it until 1687, which is pretty late. It's pretty late. And it also means your first 6 idea groups are, to a certain extent, fixed. Now, let me go through, because it's not quite that simple. But so to do Devonshire's Shackles and Mansur Army, you have to have 3 military idea groups, which I would never normally do as the Ottomans. And it feels very, very restrictive, basically. I think, personally, if you want to modernize the army, okay, fair enough. Maybe you have to have 3 military idea groups. But if you want to kill all of the Mamluks, I mean, that seems odd. It seems odd. It's possible these conditions change once the coup fires, but I don't believe they do. And so you have to take 3 military idea groups, okay? So that's 3 of them already accounted for. And then you need to regulate the harem and reign of women. You need to have either court ideas or 100 prestige. Now, 100 prestige doesn't seem that hard, but bear in mind that this firing drops you 50 prestige, and then you get a bunch of events that kill your prestige as well. So realistically, I think you have to take court ideas. You also kind of have to take court ideas because in order to get through this event chain, you have to have 15 monarch points on your leader, on your king, your sultan, which is a very, very strange requirement. And I remember getting annoyed about this in Mayo and Taxes as Qing. Sorry, not as Qing, as Ming. You had to have a certain amount of monarch points on your leader because this is one of the things that players have very little control over. One of the few things you can do is take court ideas and get one extra monarch diplo skill, which I don't actually know, but I assume works the same as extra pips for generals, in that when you get +1 on dip, that doesn't just roll your monarch. You actually get overall 1 more pip. So if you were going to roll 6 dip, one of the points that gets assigned to dip gets assigned somewhere else instead. I hope that's how it works. Otherwise, this is even more hard to do than I thought. But you're put in a very difficult position because you have to take essentially 3 military ideas and court ideas, and then if you go in here, you see restructure administration, you also have to take 2 admin ideas. So realistically, you're going to be looking at probably religious and admin if you're doing like a big concrete game as the Ottomans, which means that your first 6 idea slots are decided for you. And then it gets harder because in order to not have your islets go crazy and be able to progress through here, you have to have your islets have 10%, less than 10% liberty desire. Not even your islets, all your subjects, less than 10% liberty desire. That's crazy. That's crazy hard. You do get 33% less liberty desire from subject developments and +2 diplo rep here. So that obviously helps. But I mean, this is crazy amount of loyalty that you need to have when obviously a lot of the time players kind of, run the edge on design. And to be clear, liberty desire, to be clear, these are not, this doesn't make this bad design. It just makes it very restricting because you can do this. I mean, ideally, obviously, to control liberty desire, you want to have taken things like influence ideas and diplo ideas. But if you do that, you're going to have to wait till, gosh darn, rights of man, because that's all 8 idea slots. It's crazy. But let's say you can do that with just the first 6 idea slots. Okay, fair enough. That is what I'm going to attempt to do in the campaign I'm about to play. But you also have to get to level 7 government reforms in order to go through here. Fair enough. You have to kind of reform the government. And you have to be earning 15 admin points a month, which, I mean, you're going to be doing anyway, because you have to have, on average, 5 points in each of your monarchs things. Of course, as the Ottomans, you do have the capacity to roll monarchs. I believe 15% of the time you can get a +3 to the average monarch score, because you get a 1/3 chance to do that. But it's just like this, especially this one bugs me. The monarch point generation adding up to 15, that's not a skill issue. That's not hard. That's just dice. That's just luck. I will, this campaign I'm about to play is not going to be on camera, but I will have this. But the way I will have this is I'm going to back up saves and then I'm just going to roll leaders at the particular time when I really need to get a better leader, because I mean, otherwise you just have to sit in this crisis indefinitely until you roll a 5/5/5 or better leader, which is, I mean, that's crazy, right? I hope this isn't just me, but that seems crazy. And then the other thing I wanted to point out, just because it's really funny, if you go down the killing the Janissaries thing, they get, and this is if you play normally. There are ways that you might be able to avoid this, but if you play normally, you have to fight something like at lowest, and it can be dramatically higher than this, 1.2 million rebels. And they get your discipline and also 50% morale bonus, which is insane. And groups of like 350,000 of them spawn at once in your capital and control your capital when they spawn. Like it's a journey. And it should be hard to fight the Janissaries. But even if you have a force limit of 45 and a Janissary force limit of 23, you still spawn like 500,000 per click, and you have to do 3 clicks, having done the allow us to face the Janissaries thing, which is, I mean, a little silly. But yeah, those are my thoughts on this. It's designed to be hard, and instead it is merely restrictive. And if you're curious, by the way, here is a list of what I'm going to try and do. I think the way that I'm going to attempt this, here's the list of things I'm going to have to do, basically, from my perspective. I have to have level 7 government reform. Average autonomy has to be above the cap by at least 20%. This is a number that is not shown anywhere, annoyingly. So that's in order to make sure that this doesn't progress. You need to have at least 3 stability to avoid this progressing if you dare to have over 50 stabilities. And then if it ever starts progressing, which it probably will, because you're going to get a bunch of stab hit events, you need to have average autonomy above minimum is less than 15%, which is a very confusing way of that being phrased. That's not the dev's fault. That's just the way that EU4 code gets expressed in tooltips. It's actually very, very specific, which is why I don't really mind that it's so bizarre. But yeah, average autonomy above minimum is less than 15%. If true, it gets +2, which means you have to have at least 15% autonomy above the cap. Now, second problem, when you have the disaster active, you get minus 100% reform progress, which means you can't hover here to work out your average autonomy. And even if you could, that's your average autonomy, not your average autonomy above the cap. So this is a number that is entirely inaccessible to the player. You just have to work it out. I mean, you could math it out, or you could just go around increasing autonomy. And fun fact, you can't increase autonomy from the macro builder in provinces that have 0 autonomy. So you have to go around doing it on the map, which is kind of annoying. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to make sure I have average autonomy above the cap at least 20 higher than the cap. You have to set yourself up to be able to increase your stab a whole bunch, because you're going to need to keep that at 3. You need to have no pashas assigned at all, because if you have any pashas assigned at all, then you are not going to be able to oppose the pashas and restructure your administration properly unless you go through the disaster, essentially. Because by having 125, which is required for oppose the pashas if you don't have 0, then you're going to have to face pasha decadence, which is a horrendous event. Because as you can see, you get progress from this from 20, 40, and 60 assigned pashas. So this will fire if you have 125 almost. Yeah, I don't see any way you could possibly avoid it firing if you had 125 pashas. Unless you could just stop it launching ever. But that would mean you had to maintain 3 stability literally for every single monthly tick during the process of dealing with it, which is very challenging because there's a lot of events and you'd only have to mess up not boosting your stab once. So seems kind of implausible. You need 0% corruption because there's a bunch of things that will happen if you have corruption. You need to have core ideas, admin ideas. Well, core ideas, 3 religious ideas, 3 mill ideas and 2 admin ideas. I'm going to go with core, admin, religious, aristocratic, administrative, offensive, and quantity, or possibly quality. We'll see. You need to have, your ruler needs to have 4 in 1 stat and a total of 15 mana, which is in fact the same thing, because if you have 15 mana, then the worst case is 646. That's right, isn't it? No, I suppose that's not quite true. Yeah, no, the worst case is 645 is the worst possible combination of manas you could have to result in 15. Or rather, the closest to having less than 4 in 1 that you can have when you have 15. So you need to have at least 15 mana. I think you need to have at least 900 military points stored up, because you're going to need to strengthen your government a whole bunch as soon as this fires. It's going to kill 50 of your legitimacy, and you're going to get events that kill your legitimacy. And in order to avoid the Janissary coup, the only way to realistically do that is to have their legitimacy at your legitimacy above 75, because you can't have your loyalty for them lower than 60 if you want to be able to pass these. And you can't have the army size greater than 50% of the army of Janissary regiments if you want to pass this. So if you don't want to have the coup, you're going to have constantly over 75 legitimacy. More than that, this is one of those ones where you essentially have to make sure it stays above 75 at all times, which is going to be interesting. You need to have no active rebels, which is obviously not that hard. You need to have, on islets and subjects in general, you need to have no islets, so you need to not satisfy the have islets here. But that won't really help you if you own any provinces in Egypt, Persia, and Western Europe. And if you want to go down the islet crisis and complete this, you have to own provinces in Egypt, Persia, and Western Europe. More specifically, you have to own 50 provinces in Western Europe. I'd just like to remind you where Western Europe is. I don't know why, in order to modernize the Ottomans, you have to own land over here. I suspect it's an error because Western Europe in the code is just super region equals Europe because they never renamed it when they added Eastern Europe rather than, it all being one continent. It should be continent equals Europe is my suspicion. I think they've just written it wrong. But it could mean that they're saying the only way the Ottomans could ever fix their government was by conquering like Italian and Austrian land and stealing their tech and copying their ways of governance, which is, kind of racist, but maybe that's what they meant. I hope it isn't. I don't think it is. And so you have to have a bunch of land there, which means that given you have to have a bunch of land there, the Islet Rebellion will become active because you're going to have at least 15 provinces in those areas. At which point you're going to have to make sure you don't satisfy any of the progression things below that, which means that you can't have any islets with a liberty desire of greater than 25. And you have to have no provinces in Egypt and Persia and Western Europe that are owned by not you. You can't have them occupied, and you can't have any rebels active in those provinces, at which point you can start going down here. Now, to actually end the Islet Rebellion, you have to have a liberty desire in all of your subjects of less than 10%, which again, that's not easy, especially because if you haven't taken court ideas, you have to keep your prestige at 100. So challenging stuff. And you have to be getting 12 dip a month, which is essentially automatic because you have 15 Monarch points coming in every month as base. And then obviously there's stuff that you're going to be stacking on top of that. And then you're just about there. I think that's most of what you need. Janissary loyalty has to be 80. Their influence has to be below 40. You have to control 25 provinces in Egypt, 40 in Persia, and 50 in Western Europe, which is a really weird condition. Like, let's say the Ottomans blobbed north and east, right? They're taking over all this land, okay? Then eventually they get decadent, and the only way they can fix it, the only way, is conquering like all this and all this. Why? What a bizarre requirement. Anyway, yeah. Those are my thoughts on the Ottoman decadence system. I think it's cool. I think the design philosophy, the first bit of the design philosophy I described, where it's designed to be something you can just avoid, but that gets increasingly difficult over time as decadence grows. Sure, makes sense. And then something that you can overcome through a really challenging event. Fine, that all sounds good. But to me, this is so restrictive. If I were designing this, and this is purely off the top of my head, I'm not saying this would immediately be better, but this is the kind of path I would take it. These things should be giving you unrest, and they should be giving you penalties to legitimacy, and they should be giving you challenges around that. And you need to overcome them by, reconsolidating and stabilizing your country and things like that. Not just like have at least 15 admin production per month and have 15 Monarch points, because these are just... It's not skillful. It's not skillful to do that. Whereas being able to handle, or something, or even like giving you the effects of being over 100% overextension, something like that, something that's very challenging to deal with, but can be dealt with. I do not like the freaking Freedman's epistles. I need to remember to turn that off. That's something that you need to be able to deal with, and you need to be able to, you can approach it from different strategies and all that kind of thing. I personally would prefer something like that. Anyway, I said it was going to be a short video. I rambled for 25 minutes. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I am probably not going to upload any vanilla EU4 content to get your hopes up, but there is some awesome vanilla EU4 content over on Speed 5, which I'm producing. So go check that out. Speed 5 Official on YouTube and Twitch. They're a cool company, and I'm really enjoying working with them. We're doing a bunch of cool EU4 stuff, both in the past and coming up. New, as yet unannounced stuff. So keep your eyes out for that. Hope you didn't mind my rambling too much. I enjoyed doing it. Thanks for watching, everybody.